So I'll hand back over to Mike now, because we're going to have a slightly different arrangement this morning, aren't we, Mike, before we consider our planning applications.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'll just run us briefly through the checks to make sure you can all see and hear us. Then I'll just explain in terms of how today's meeting will go. So firstly, we've heard from the Chair, so nice and clear. Welcome to Councillor Thompson. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, thank you, Mike, I can.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome to Councillor Doyle for her first meeting as a full voting. You're still on mute, Mirna, but I'll acknowledge your hand wave. Thank you. We also have Councillor Makinson, who has joined us as well, who will be speaking on one of the later items in his capacity as a ward councillor. So welcome to Councillor Makinson also. Thank you, Andrew. Returning to our order of business today. In terms of practicalities, first of all, I need to advise you that agenda item 9, related to numbers 47 to 55 Smithdown Lane, Liverpool 7, in Central Ward, has been withdrawn from consideration at today's meeting. This is at the request of the applicants, and expect the application to come forward in due course to a future meeting of committee. In terms of apologies for absence, we have apologies from Councillor Conception. Welcome to Councillor Prince, who's joined us for today's meeting, and we also have apologies from Councillor Dave Cummings. As the Chair alluded to, we have had a supplementary agenda published earlier on today. Councillor Thompson, if I may.
Yeah, it was just in the context of apologies. I just need to let the committee know that I will need to leave at around 11 o'clock today. Sorry for that.
Thank you. That's much appreciated. Thank you, Helen, for letting us know. Just to revert to what I was explaining, obviously, as members will be aware and the public will have seen, we have public relating to the policy weighting given to the Liverpool local plan in terms of it emerges as our new planning policy framework at Liverpool citywide level. Now, we'll come to that item very briefly with members' agreements rather than dealing with the applications firstly. But I suggested appropriate that we do deal with the usual procedural matters. So with that in mind, firstly, are there any declaration of interest from members at all? Thank you. None to declare. Our minutes of our last virtual meeting, pages 4 to 9 of your agenda pack. There's the meeting of the 2nd of February. And just to remind members that there's a slight typographical error in the published minutes, which on the version of the agenda inadvertently omit Councillor Prince, who was indeed there, but the published version online, I'm happy to confirm Councillor Prince was in full attendance. So those will be the formalised minutes. I have no urgent business to draw to everyone's attention. So with the agreement of the committee, I suggest, if the chair is amenable to this, that item number 11 on your supplementary agenda, pages 149 to 171, be taken next. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a report on the weighting to be given in planning policy terms to the Liverpool local plan. Chair.
I hope you've had a chance to have a look at the issue about weighting going to be given for items, and we've already seen that in the agenda, haven't we? So can I move? Sorry, I've got the wrong piece.
Chair, I believe we have Jane Haywood and Mike Eccles from the planning team alongside the head of planning, who
so
will be
going to
happy
speak. So they.
If they may, please, Chair.
So, Jane, would you like to come in first? I think it's you first.
Thank you, Chair.
Jane, I'll just introduce.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that this is my report to the Planning Committee, not necessarily Jeanette McLaughlin's, the City Solicitor. And it's before you just to explain the weight that we're taking forward in the policies within the local plan now that we're a very advanced stage of the local plan. We've been through a successful hearing, and it also will set out the next step. So Jane's just going to take you through quickly and briefly through the report, which is quite detailed in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sorry for not bringing you in first. I was told that it would be Jane.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure you understood. It was my report to you as head of planning. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the purpose of this report is to outline the stages to get the local plan now through to adoption, and also the way that head of planning now considers can be attached to those policies ahead of adoption in the decision-making process. In respect of timescales, the examination hearings were completed in November, and we're now working on main modifications to the local plan to ensure that the local plan is found sound. We're looking to bring a report to Cabinet in April to seek endorsement to consult on those publicly, and then we're aiming to targeting September for formal adoption of the local plan. That would have to go through full council to get that adoption. So that's the broad process that we're working to at the moment. The other aspect of the report is to look at the weight that could now be given to the policies within the local plan, given that we are at an advanced stage in its preparation. So National Planning Policy Framework allows for increasing weight to be given to local plan policies according to the stage of preparation. So we have undertaken an assessment of all the policies within the local plan as proposed to be modified to assess the weight that we consider can be given to them. And we've assessed all the policies as either having moderate or up to very significant weight. Now that is reflective of either the main modifications and the extent of the objections received to those policies. The report also, before Planning Committee, also outlines that to take account of the weight that we now feel we can give to policies, there'll be a section included within Planning Committee reports to set out the policies that are applicable to individual development proposals and the weight that can be given to those in the decision-making process. So we now feel that, you know, many of the policies can attach significant weight to them in the decision-making process, and going forward we will be looking to use those policies. So that's broadly what the report is setting out. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
Are there any questions?
Don't appear to be any indications at this stage,
No,
Chair.
I can't see anything, Michael, so shall I move on?
If I may, I believe Councillor Juarez has raised her hand somewhat belatedly,
Right.
but thank you, Councillor
Juarez,
Juarez.
would you like to go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Once the local plan is adopted by all council, how soon are we going to be able to use those policies properly in the planning process of this local authority?
Yeah, well, once we go to full council, which we're hoping will be September, to seek formal adoption of the local plan, there's then a 6-week legal challenge period. At the end of that, the local plan will receive full weight in the decision-making process. So that will then replace the policies and the unitary development plan. So it will replace the whole of the unitary development plan. It will receive full weight.
Yeah. So
sorry.
We're looking at the winter, probably November, where we can start using those policies.
Hopefully by October.
Oh, right. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
So there seem to be no other questions. So can I move that the recommendation as set out in the report be approved, and that we note both the information provided and the weighting which we can give in the Liverpool local plan? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. If all members could indicate your respective voting position on the item in turn. So, Chair, just confirm your agreement. Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat. Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Thank you. Just to confirm, the voting is unanimous in relation to that supplementary item, and that is therefore approved in terms of the approach to be adopted. We'll now revert to our previously published original agenda, which takes us back to item number 4 on today's papers, which relates to land at Sherwood Street in Vauxhall, Liverpool 3, which is located in Kirkdale ward. Pages 10 to 43 of the agenda pack provide the information on this report. Chair.
Thank you. Now we have a speaker here to give us a presentation, and that is James Hadfield. So would you like to go ahead, James?
Certainly, I've got some slides that I've issued.
Excellent.
Those are the ones, thank you. Good morning, members of the Planning Committee. My name is James Hadfield and I work for Mersey Heat. Mersey Heat is the energy services company developing a sustainable heat network for Liverpool waters and for other developments in the area. I'm here today to talk to you about the proposed energy centre on Great Howard Street, which we hope will become the heart of this network. It will come as no surprise that we fully endorse the recommendation of your professional officer, and we do not contest any of the conditions that are being recommended to control the development. Next slide, please. On this slide, there are 2 images showing the main components of the energy centre. On the left, there's the energy centre itself, a building containing heat pumps and boilers, and on the right, there's a discrete pumping station, which sits between the energy centre and a source of water. Water is abstracted via the pumping station, which is utilised in water source heat pumps. These use electricity to extract and boost solar heat stored within the water. This heat will be transferred into underground pipes, which would distribute the heat to our customers. The flue height that you can see on the left-hand image represents the very worst case scenario. It should be 10 metres shorter than this unless the rest of the site comes into use. Although gas boilers are required to cater for peaks and to provide backup, 85% of the heat generated will be sourced from the heat pumps. So this network will greatly decarbonise customers' heating compared to a fossil fuel alternative. Our chosen delivery partner, Vital Energy, are a member of the Considerate Contractor Scheme. As such, they'll be doing everything possible to minimise disruption during construction. In other areas of the project, for example, acoustic shrouds have been used to ensure that noise is minimised. Next slide, please. On this slide, we see the materials that were issued to the closest 180 households. In response, we only received 2 letters of objection, and I'm glad to say that the concerns raised were dealt with within the application materials. Next slide, please. This picture shows a 3D image of Liverpool waters, as well as other areas, including Harcourt and 10 Streets. It's our ambition to have much of what you see in the forefront of this image connected to the network catered for by the Energy Centre. The Energy Centre will utilise Liverpool's historic dock system as a source of sustainable heat, helping the city meet its carbon targets. Thank you for your time this morning, and I would welcome any questions.
Don't appear to be any questions indicated so far. Chair, if members could raise your hand clearly at this stage if you do wish to ask any of the applicant's representatives. Thank you.
No, I can't see anybody. Oh yes, here we have Malcolm. If you'd like to come in, Councillor Kennedy.
Just a quick question to enhance my understanding of this project. The water is being taken out of the canal and is being ejected into the dock system. Now that's, you know, I know it's probably a daft question, but that water is being taken out of the canal, ejected somewhere else. So that's additional water being taken out of the canal that wouldn't normally be. And the Canal Trust have, within the report, want further details about deflecting and mitigating the impact on navigation by boaters on the canal. So I'm just, how does it work regarding level of water in the canal, etc.?
James, if you'd like to answer that, please.
Thanks for your question, Malcolm. We've had extensive dialogue with Canals and Rivers Trust in order to gain their comfort around this scheme. The chosen area to extract this water has been picked specifically because it's functionally linked to the dock system. So the area where it's being taken from, if you head west from that location, it goes underneath a tunnel into Stanley Dock, which is then connected to Trafalgar Dock, which is where we will re-inject this water. Therefore, impact on levels of water is essentially zero because it's functionally connected.
Malcolm?
Yes, that's the answer I was looking for.
We now have Councillor Juarez with a question.
Yes, my question is due to the site being at this location and it being close to properties, what will the noise levels be like from daily operations of the plant?
We've done extensive studies on noise. We've been out to site. We've measured background levels, etc. We'll be ensuring that the construction of the energy centre takes that into account and ensures that there's no significant impact on the dwellings on the other side of the railway bridge. This is covered extensively in the noise report, which was submitted with the application, and this has received a no objection from the council's expert on this matter.
Thank you, James. And can I invite Councillor John Prince, followed by Councillor Hanson. John, if you'd like to come in with your question.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Will there be any impact on the canal towpath?
No.
It will stay open.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
And Councillor Joe Hanson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to obviously the site runs onto Love Lane, which runs onto the back of the Eldonian village, and obviously I'm not sure the distances, but clearly in terms of construction, there's going to be some disturbance and whatever. So I'm concerned because the Eldonian village is a World Heritage Site. What steps are you going to take to ensure that the residents living in the Eldonian village are not disturbed by the developments? And secondly, in relation to the smokestack, you mentioned that the visual would be probably 10 meters less than what the visual in terms of the visual impact that smokestack or whatever sort of stack you're calling it. How high is it going to be?
So,
and in terms of it's the output from that stack, what is the output that's coming out that stack?
It's about height of the stack
I can't hear the words you're saying, Chair.
James, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, no problem. Taking each question one at a time. Impact on Eldonians. As I mentioned, it's really important to our contractor to maintain their contractor certificate, and they'll be doing everything that they can to minimise disruption, including sticking to the agreed working times. They'll be using drilled piles rather than driven piles. They'll be using acoustic baffles when appropriate. And also, once the shell of the building is constructed, it's constructed to such a good degree in relation to acoustics that the internal works won't have any impact on the residents on the other side of the bridge. So the noisy works are during a very short time of the programme, essentially. Question 2 was related to the stack height. The image shows a 25-metre flue. It should be 15 metres until the rest of the site comes into use. We thought it was sensible to create an application taking into account that design envelope, because it is a large area of derelict brownfield type land, and we hope and we think it should come into use in the future. It seems a shame given its location. So we just wanted to make sure that we had a planning permission which would allow us to extend that flue should it come into use. Question 3, the output of the flue is exactly the same as you would expect from a gas boiler within your house. So it's some CO2 and some steam. It's mainly steam, to be honest. Obviously, the quantities are far larger than if it was a gas boiler inside a residential dwelling, but the components are the same.
Thank you, James. And Councillor Doyle. Sarah, would you like to ask a question? I think you're muted, Sarah.
There we are, sorry. Thanks, Trish. I think it sounds like a really interesting initiative, James. I was just wondering if your client is, as much as it's eco-friendly, is also interested in the project itself, bringing jobs and opportunities to local people, and is any of that discussed in terms of what the client is proposing to do?
The company that sits behind this is Peel Energy, and they've delivered many renewable projects over the years, from wind farms and charging facilities for cars and that sort of thing. There's always been a focus on community. If you have a look at Frodsham wind farm, for example, there's a community benefit fund associated with that, and local labour has been used whenever and wherever it's been possible to do so. We do have to acknowledge that there is some very technical work required here, and in that case it will be simply the best on the market that we can get. But in other areas we will strive to use local labour wherever possible.
Thank you, James, and I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you. So there being no further speakers on this application, thank you for that, James. I'm going to ask our case officer to comment on the presentation and summarise any issues.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Felicity Collins, I'm case officer for this application. I think we've had a fairly thorough questions there from the committee members, and a presentation there that's probably covered most of the key issues, so I won't say too much. You've seen this as a proposal for an energy centre that would serve quite a large area of Liverpool waters and potentially other existing and future developments. It would be built out in phases, so the application has allowed for a full capacity that would serve that sort of area, but initially would come forward in smaller phases to serve the network as it grows. I think it's fair to say, you know, just in summary, the principle of low carbon and renewable energy developments is very much supported by the NPPF and by our development plan, and supports the Liverpool City region aims for zero carbon. The development of energy centre specifically on this site is supported by our 10 Streets strategic regeneration framework. It's specifically identified in that document as a site for an energy centre, and all the technical assessments which your officers have reviewed in detail have demonstrated that it can be accommodated without harm, particularly to those residential neighbours, and it's probably worth just noting that those assessments took into account potential for residential development right up to the energy centre, so on the existing vacant land, so that would be even closer than the residents that are in Eldonian Village. So we're satisfied that that's been demonstrated through the application. just picking up on the flue height point, you know, we have taken that into consideration in the report, and a 15-metre flue height will be sufficient for the initial build out, and we would only want to see that to go up to 25 metres if the rest of the vacant land were built out. So the 10 Streets SRF identifies that site as being a maximum of 6 stories, so somewhere around 18 metres in height. So the 25-metre flue would only be needed if that site were built out to its maximum kind of scale and massing parameters that are set by the SRF. Other than that, I don't think there's anything further to say. You've got a full report in front of you, which identifies that the applicant has agreed to pay the necessary Section 106 contributions, and subject to the conditions that we've recommended approval.
So are there any other questions?
Don't appear to be any indications, Chair.
And is Dr. Russell happy? Does he want to add anything about the sound? Ian?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Ian. Did
Yeah.
you want to just say you've checked out all the sound, which I know you have, the noise?
I have, yes. Yeah. The only thing I would add is that the railway viaduct provides quite a significant acoustic barrier between the site and the existing in Vauxhall. So yeah, I'm happy with the report. There will be a construction management plan, and we'll keep an eye on it, but I'm happy that can be mitigated.
Right, thank you, Ian. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, before I take the vote, are there any comments from members? No? In which case, Chair, your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez? Councillor Juarez, is that you indicating your vote?
Yes. Against?
Would you like your dissent recorded by name?
Yes, please.
Thank you. The application is therefore passed by a majority of those voting, with Councillor Juarez voting against, and her dissent will be recorded. Just before we move to our next item of business, one of our colleagues on committee has inadvertently shared your screen. Can I ask members to therefore check the upper control bar, and on the right hand side at the top you will see a square with an arrow, or a square with an X at the bottom. If you could click, if you have an X in that square, that's the sharing box. If you could please click on it now, and it will remove the share. I believe that's being done now. That'll be excellent. Thank you, and that returns to normal display. With that in mind, we'll move on to our next item of business, which is number 5 on today's agenda. This item relates to the Colemans Safe House on Park Road, Dingle, Liverpool 8, which is located within Princes Park Ward. For this particular application, we don't have any speakers either for or against, but we do have a number of images which I'm going to display on screen to assist, and once they're displayed, I'd ask the case officer to comment accordingly. Thank you.
Over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, I'm Stuart Clark. I'm the team leader for the Development Control South team. This is an application to erect telecommunications antennae on the roof of the 4-storey Colemans depository building. 12 antennae are proposed using both existing poles and through the erection of new poles. The building has a range of existing telecommunication located upon the roof and the upper side walls for a number of years, and it's an established feature in the street scene. The proposed use of structures and buildings which already accommodate telecommunications equipment is fully in accordance with the aims of the National Planning Policy Framework and fully in accordance with Policy HD 27 of the UDP. This negates the need for more visually intrusive street masts so as to minimise any visual impacts, and are seen as the optimum solution in the delivery of telecommunication networks. So what you can see on screen there, I believe that's the existing scenario. So you can see the masts on the top of the roof and at the side, and the antenna at the side of the building. New stuff is the one on the left-hand side of the drawing, and some additional ones on the existing one on the right. So whilst the new poles and antennae will be visible, they will be painted grey to blend with the sky and will sit within a context of where there are existing rooftop antennae that already form part of the street scene. As such, it's not considered that any additional equipment would have any significant visual impact on the wider street scene, and any such impact would be offset by the wider benefits of introducing 5G technology. Concern has been raised by one objector that the existing masts will interfere with the TV signal in the area. However, there's been no evidence submitted to substantiate this claim, and the operator advises that such equipment will not interfere with TV signals where the equipment is operating correctly. Furthermore, if there has been an issue with TV signals in the area being affected by the existing equipment, we would expect to have seen many such claims as opposed to a single claim in this instance. And therefore, given the lack of evidence to substantiate the claim and the very small number of objections, we consider that minimal weight should be attached to this objection, Chair. So off the back of that, Chair, we consider this to be the best solution to deliver 5G technology in this area, and we're happy to recommend approval. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Don't appear to be any indicated, Chair.
I can't see anybody indicating. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. And no comments from members, in which case, Chair, your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Agreed.
And lastly, Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Thank you. That application is therefore carried unanimously and approved on that basis, subject to any relevant conditions as reported in the case officer report. We'll now move on to agenda item 6 on today's papers. This relates to site at West Derby Road, Southwest, which is located clearly on West Derby Road in Tuebrook, in Liverpool 6, which is in the Tuebrook and Stoneycroft ward area of the city. Similar to our last item of business, I can advise that we don't have any applicants or objectors present to address us, but we do have some images which, if members are agreeable, I will display on screen shortly, and once those are visible, I would ask the case officer to comment accordingly on those. Those should be coming up on screen in the next few seconds. Thank you, everyone.
And over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. My name is John Hayes. I am the planning officer dealing with development management for the north of the city. Chair, this is another application for telecommunications equipment. It's a type of application that members of this committee are familiar. So it's a mast of 17.5 metres with the antennae attached to the top. The proposal here is to erect that within the central reservation of West Derby Road, close to the railway bridge and opposite the Dorset House Market and the police station. So it's you'll see that from your site plan where it's to be located. Given that context, Chair, given that it is within a wide road within the central reservation, given the surrounding street furniture and the raised elevation of the Tuebrook Market and the railway bridge and other features in that area, your officer's view is that this would not have a harmful effect on the wider visual amenity of the area. You'll see, Chair, that there is one objection from a local resident raising concerns about health impacts. But again, as this committee is familiar, only limited weight can be given to those concerns, given the signing of an ICNIRP certificate and the advice in National Planning Policy Framework. Happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions? I don't see any, are there, unless you've got any, Michael?
None I can see, Chair.
So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Are there any comments from members before I take the vote? No? In which case, Chair, your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. That application is therefore agreed unanimously, and similar to the last item, that's subject to any relevant conditions as reported in the case officer report. We now move on to our next item of business with your agreement, which is number 7 on today's agenda, which relates to number 4 Mapledale Road, which is in Liverpool 18 in Churchwood. Chair, as you'll be aware, we have some speakers for this particular application. If I could ask you to bring relevant parties in accordingly. Thank you.
Yes. So we have a presentation and we have Richard Carmichael here to take us through it. So if you'd like to come in now, Richard, the slides should be coming up now.
Good morning, committee. My name is Richard Carmichael. I'm here to talk in favour of the application for number 4 Mapledale Road. We can pull the next slide up, please. Number 4 Mapledale Road is a commercial and retail premises located on the junction of Mapledale Road and the Allerton District Shopping Centre. We have retail ground floor and offices to first and second floor. There is an existing approval in place to amend the existing building with an increase in roof height, introduction of a 3rd floor to create additional office accommodation. This application seeks to revise that existing approval to minor further amendments to the roof structure and changing the top 2 floors of offices into 4 apartments. If we can take the next slide, please. As we see there, there's the property located really as part of the Allerton District Shopping Centre. If you take the next slide, please. Here we can see the existing building as she stands at the moment. To the right-hand side, that's one of the Allerton Road shops, as is the building in the background. To the left, we have an existing garage, and then far left is the nearest residential property. The elevation at the lower half of the slide is viewing the elevation as though from the residential properties to the south of the building. If we move to the next slide, please. The revision that is being sought today in this application is to revise the roof structure with the addition of dormers and increased height, which you'll see is in line with the buildings at the rear. Additional office accommodation to the 1st floor to create 4 apartments, 1st floor office and ground floor retail. What we can see from this drawing here is that the 1st floor extension will have minimal visual impact as it is hidden behind the roof of the adjacent garage building. On the upper floors, windows have been obscured to the 1st floor and then structured in such a way on the 2nd floor dormers that they are providing no overlooking of the adjacent residential properties. With regards to the general arrangement, we have on-site bin and cycle storage available in secure area to the right-hand side of the property. Your officers have concluded that there is no overbearing from this revision to the adjacent properties on the left. And with regards to highways and parking, we are directly adjacent to the Allerton District Centre, and as such we have the full weight of public transport options and rail network options available to us. With losing the 1st floor, the 2nd floor office accommodation, it's been agreed that there is an overall reduction in parking required for the scheme. We'll be losing approximately 20 staff members that could use that area there, and replacing that with approximately 8 residential users of the building. So overall, a reduction in any vehicle load in the area, but as we say, strong links to the local district, sustainable transport network in that area. Overall, that concludes. We're here for any questions should they be needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And are there any questions?
Councillor Juarez, Chair.
Councillor Juarez, would you like to put your question?
Yeah, I'd like to know, will these apartments, is there going to be any outdoor space? Will there be any outdoor space provided for any resident living in those apartments?
Would you like to come in on that, Richard?
Yeah, Councillor Juarez, no, the apartments do not provide additional outdoor garden areas. They would make use of local amenity spaces within the area.
Thank you. And Councillor Prince.
Thank you. Is there any form of fire escape for the additional height of the building?
There is a protected fire core through the centre of the building, which has been assessed, will be assessed part of the building control application, with a bypass suitable for the nature and size of the building. There's no requirement for additional fire escape routes from a building of this size or design.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And I think that was addressed in the notes, but the case officer might want to come back on that. So, Councillor Juarez, you've got your hand up, really, so I'll bring you back in.
Thank you, Chair. My other question was to do with bin storage. Where will the bin storage be located on these premises?
The property includes a secure area to the right-hand side, which is currently gated and provides sufficient space for off-street secure bin and cycle storage.
Thank you. Again, I think that was pointed out in the notes. So can I hand over now to our case officer, who's going to summarise the issues on the application and comment on the presentation.
If I may
Yes,
briefly interrupt, Chair, I believe we have Councillor Makinson who's joined us to address as a local council objecting to the application, and he is
I
present.
thought that was just on Score Lane. Sorry,
Just on this one, please, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, so Councillor Makinson, would you like to make your comments now? And apologies, I thought you were here for Score Lane.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to object to this application. I am a local resident, but this application will have minimum impact on me. My real concern is for my constituents who live near the property. First of all, visually, this development is out of proportion for a residential street. The current building already looks out of place, but this extension means it will stand well above the existing shop frontage on Allerton Road. Parking is at a premium here. Every space is occupied day and night. Parking services are continually sent out to this location to deal with illegal parking on the pavement and grass verges. Now, the planning officer's report talks about the potential capacity of the current building as 15 to 20. Well, as a resident of this road, I can tell you it's never had anything like that number of staff. But even if it did, they would only be present during office hours. And this development removes only one floor of office space anyway, unless the developer plans to return at a later date to add further apartments. So, Chair, with parking at such short supply, the local area relies on sharing parking spaces between residents and businesses. Staff and customers of the local shops park in the road during the day, and when they're gone, the residents return from work in the evening and use the same spaces. So quite simply, this application's parking usage can't be compared with the existing usage of the building. This already crowded road has roughly 33 parking spaces in it, which are divided between 45 properties. So potentially adding up to 8 extra cars is a significant increase, and it would seriously harm the residential amenity of my constituents in the road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Makinson. And I'm going to invite our case officer Larkin now. Maybe he will have some comments about that, or maybe Andy Dingmore might want to come in. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. You've received a full presentation from the applicant, and there's a detailed report before members relating to the increase of the height of the building in connection with the provision of 4 flats on the upper floors. As you will have seen, the current building has an existing presence in the street scene, and the proposal to increase the height of the eaves by 0.5 metres and the ridge by 1.5 metres is not considered to be such an increase in the context of the existing building that the resultant building would be of an unacceptable scale in the street scene or constitute overdevelopment of the site. The existing upper floors of the buildings are offices with windows that have line of sight across gardens on Mapledale Road. As such, there is already some degree of overlooking from the upper floors. The proposed new layout has been designed so that the windows on the elevation facing the rear gardens of Mapledale Road and Limedale Road would be obscurely glazed or high levels, save for one lounge window on the second floor. This is going to be at normal level, and that window is an existing office window, and therefore there's already activity within that space and some overlooking associated with it. It's accepted that a residential element would introduce a different kind of overlooking with possibly some evening potential. However, the introduction of curtains, blinds, etc., and given it's just one window, your officers considered that is acceptable. It should also be noted that there's a garage in between the property and a space of 10 metres between the application site and the party boundary of the nearest residential property. That's slightly substandard to what we'd normally expect by about 3 or 4 metres. But given all of the above about what currently exists and the level of overlooking that can happen now, it's considered that this one window is going to be of such a degree that it would be acceptable. However, that's clearly a matter for the committee to form a view in that respect. In terms of the highway side of things, my colleague Andy Dingle will jump in and answer any specific queries if I don't cover them. But as you'll see from the report, the application site is located within the Allerton Road District Centre, which means it's in direct proximity to existing goods and services and very good public transport links. A proposal of this scale, we would normally expect 4 off-street parking spaces if it was not in a location where good public transport was. So given that, we're happy that there's adequate facilities and provision for future residents to use those transport facilities. Notwithstanding that, Head of Highways Transportation has advised that there's appropriate parking capability that could accommodate 4 spaces within the wider area, and he's happy that there will be no detrimental impact on highway safety as a result of that. The only other really queries that people have raised was about light pollution from artificial light coming from the building. That's already there from the offices, and particularly in the winter months. With it being residential, yes, you might get a few more lights turned on, but residential is likely to have curtains, blinds, and the light pollution from artificial light within a residential property is not significant in any way, shape or form, and we're happy that wouldn't have any detrimental effect on the amenity of nearby neighbours. You've heard from the applicant that there's adequate bin storage and cycle storage in the alley to the side of the premises, and we're happy with that as well. And Councillor Juarez queried about outdoor space. It's not uncommon for flats above commercial premises to have no amenity space, but in this instance, it's within reasonable walking distance of nearby significant public open spaces. So we're happy that the amenity of future residents would be safeguarded, Chair. And on the back of that, we're happy to recommend approval, but I'm happy to answer any questions unless Andy Dingle wants to jump in.
I can't hear from Andy, so I'll pass over to you, Councillor Juarez, for your comment or question.
Yes, Chair. Maybe probably this is a question for Andy Dingle. When they did the traffic assessment and the issue with parking, at what times were these surveys conducted? Because Mapledale Road, it's very, very difficult to get a parking space during the daytime and in the evenings, and also round that corner of Allerton Road, it gets very, very busy with cars parking there. And also, the turning is quite tight for anybody going left down that road. So as well, if people leave their cars parked there, that poses a danger to oncoming traffic on Allerton Road. So I'd like to know when was that analysis, at what time of day that analysis was conducted? Because to me, Allerton Road, Mapledale, and all those roads are quite congested with cars parked there. So yeah, that's my question really.
Andy, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andy Dingle, Highways Development Control Team Leader. In relation to this application and many applications, we consider it doesn't necessarily require us to make a site visit and to assess the parking levels. We base our assessment on local knowledge and experience and having assessed similar applications in similar locations. So, you know, we know fully that this area experiences competition for parking spaces, particularly during the day, where you've got demand for parking generated by the shops, you know, with it being a district centre. You know, our view is that it's a highly accessible location. It's right in the district centre. It's got excellent public transport facilities in terms of high frequency bus services on the doorstep. It's not necessary for somebody to own a car to be able to live here and live here without too much difficulty. You know, I make the point, as I've made previously, that if somebody's considering moving to one of these apartments and either renting or buying one of the apartments, and they do have a car or they intend to own a car, they may consider that it's not the right location for them, and they consider different locations where they do have the confidence of being able to secure a car parking space within the site or close by. So we accept there is competition for spaces. Any further demand will mean that, you know, they'll have to park a little bit further away than maybe they would like to, you know, in any other kind of situation. I think the other point to make as well is in relation to the extant use of the building. And whilst Councillor Makinson made the point that, you know, he didn't think it was particularly well occupied at the moment as offices, that's not to say that there couldn't be a dozen or a couple of dozen staff employed in those offices, which in itself would generate quite a significant demand for car parking during the day. So when we make our assessment, we have to consider what the likely demand for car parking would be in terms of its proposed use versus what the likely demand for car parking would be with its extant use. And our view is that for 4 apartments, the parking demand will be less than what it will be as an office use. So in conclusion, we don't have any objections. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Doyle, would you like to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the proposer of the application, and it might offset some of the concerns around parking. Would the proposer be willing to provide any sort of bike facilities, bike storage facilities, external to where the property is? Because I know if they're internal bike facilities, it might compromise some of the fire safety. But if there was external bike facilities, it would appear. I know I myself ride my bike everywhere, and when I was going to, you know, look for somewhere to live, it's something that I would take into account.
Chair, this is Stuart again. I may be able to answer this question.
Yes, okay. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, as part of the presentation, you heard that there's space down the side of the building for bin store and cycle stores. If you remember, if I reference condition 5 on their papers, there's an actual condition requiring them to provide cycle storage in this location for us to agree. So we're happy that that condition would ensure that there was a cycle space for each flat.
Thank you, Stuart.
Are there any other questions?
Don't appear to be any further indications, Chair.
So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Juarez, you given an indication that you'd like to speak?
Yes, please. Well, I'd like to move an amendment not to approve this application today. And the reason for that is because Mapledale Road is quite a narrow road. Cars can only park on one side of the road. There's been quite a few objections. So the reason that I think we should not approve this application today is because simply the scale of massing over 4 floors is overdevelopment of the site. And also, you know, I think that it would have an impact on highway safety, and it would have an impact on residential amenity. So I'm asking the committee today to not approve this application today, as it's not suitable for that location.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Does any member of the committee wish to second that amendment? No, in which case, just to confirm, Councillor Juarez, that amendment falls, and we revert to considering and voting on the original recommendation of the Chair, which will be to approve the application. So returning to the Chair's resolution, Chair, your vote, please. Chair, your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Maybe
Councillor Thompson.
we need to turn microphones off, Michael, because I thought I said that quite clearly the first time.
You did,
people
Chair.
need
It
to
just
be
didn't come
on
across at all. Yeah, just a reminder to colleagues, if you please ensure you're on mute if you're not speaking. So, Councillor Thompson next.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle.
Agreed, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez.
Against?
Would you like your dissent recorded by name, Mirna?
Yes, please.
That will be done. Thank you. Just to confirm that the application is therefore passed by a majority. Councillor Mirna Juarez dissenting in terms of the decision of committee. And again, just kind of remind members to ensure that you don't inadvertently share your screen accidentally, as I believe is the case again at this moment in time. Just if you could again check the share content box on the upper right hand quadrant of your screen. It's a square, and for if you're inadvertently sharing, it'll have an X within that box just next to the microphone logo. If you could just click on that accordingly, that should take off the share at the moment. With it in mind, we'll now move on to our next item of business. And can I just remind colleagues again that you please ensure that your microphone is turned off if you're not speaking. And again, just a usual reminder in terms of sharing screens. Thank you. Juarez, you've raised your hand again, please. You're on mute, please, Councillor Juarez.
Sorry, Michael. I've left my hand up by mistake. I'll take it down now.
Okay, thank you. Just want to double check. Thank you. We'll therefore revert to agenda item 8 on the papers. This relates to Briarwood at 3 Carnatic Road, Liverpool 18, which is in Greenbank Ward. Chair, if I may, I believe we have an agent here to give us a presentation, and I believe you have the details before you. I'll just bring the images up on screen.
So can I invite Colin Williams to speak to us whilst there's a brief presentation? I think the images will come up now, Colin. So if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this scheme to you today. If you can move on to the next slide, please, Michael. We'll try and get through it fairly quickly. This is the site plan. You can see the location of the site is what I call the bottom end of Carnatic Road, given that the road rises up from Egbert Vale, and it's right at the end of Victoria Road. The existing access is to the right of where you see the circle of trees there, and the existing access has been amended to create the access for the revised scheme. So could you go to next slide, please, Michael? This shows the footprint of the building in a proposed site plan in relation to Carnatic Court on the left-hand side, and also Esmeralda, which is a mixed-use building between spa and it's got overnight accommodation. So it's not a residential building as such. There's an on-site manager there. You can see on the site plan, in the very bottom left, there's the bin storage area, and to the rear on the left-hand side, you can see the cycle store there. 21 car parking spaces does exceed standard, but obviously the site's big enough to accommodate it as well. And also, while we looked at this, our new street trees, notwithstanding that the applicant has agreed to pay the council a street tree contribution. Just while you look at that, you can see that there's a blue line, hatch line, that shows the separation to Carnatic Court, which has been maintained. Particularly since we've amended the plans, it centralises within the plot. Could you go to the next slide, please, Michael, if you will? Thank you. This is just to show typical floor layout across 4 floors. Each apartment is 2-bedroom. They are quite substantial, pretty much 1,000 square feet in old money terms. And everyone is as per approved on appeal in terms of the inclusive design, BM41s. But as these are slightly bigger, they're actually designed that if there's a requirement from any particular purchaser to have it upgraded into terms of M42 and M43 standard, any one of these apartments can do so. So you go to the next slide, please, Michael. This is just the elevations. You can see the front and rear and the 2 sides. Again, just while you're looking, you can see the orange hatch line, and that indicates the position of the approved scheme. So you can see it's actually slightly taller, the approved scheme. The new scheme is a little bit lower in terms of the overall ridge height, and being fairly central to the site, it is pulled away a bit more from Esmeralda, which was the council officers' main concerns when they refused the original scheme. So actually this scheme improved the situation slightly for Esmeralda, and although it's kicked slightly closer to Carnatic Court, as you saw on the site plan before, it doesn't actually impinge any greater on the interface distances to them or to the residential properties at the back as well. So just to clarify, this is a replacement scheme for one that's been approved not long ago. It's brought to committee, as far as I know, because we are agreeing to pay a Section 106 contribution, which was not part of the appeal scheme. As your officer report outlines, it does comply with both the UDP and the new, or hopefully soon to be adopted, local plan in terms of the impact on amenity, design and access, and on heritage assets in the conservation area. I think it's in section 3.4 of your report, it quotes what the inspector said on appeal in terms of scale and massing and overall design, preserving the character of the conservation of the Moss Hill area. And this scheme, as amended, does that. One final point, you'll note a comment from your design officer about the side entrance. It'd rather be on the ground floor. The whole of this site is screened by a 2-metre high sandstone wall, which is retained in the trees. You actually can't see in this site unless you get into that gate. So from outside in the street scene, it would not make one iota of a difference where that entrance door was in terms of activity to the street. So overall, I think it's a well-balanced report, and I would hope that you would accept the recommendation of your officers. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Malcolm. Councillor Kennedy. Malcolm, I think you need to unmute.
I do beg your pardon. I was reading with some interest the comments of the inclusive design specialist, and I didn't quite comprehend your comments on inclusive design. Could you tell me how many of the apartments as built as per the plan would be suitable for wheelchair users?
Yes, all apartments are suitable for wheelchair users. All apartments are designed at the moment to the minimum standard of M41, which was the standard that was accepted on appeal. And again, that's confirmed in your officer report. You know, with the policy at the moment going through the local plan has had some comments about modification, and that is about whether there's actually a specific need to have an M42 or an M43 unit, which is a slightly larger and has different circulation spaces to accommodate wheelchairs. These apartments, in comparison to the approved scheme, are bigger, and there's much more opportunity to have any of these apartments on any floor because there's a lift to be suitable for wheelchair access. So if any purchaser wants wheelchair access, they'll be fully designed to do so. But every apartment is suitable to accommodate wheelchair access.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that now, Malcolm, or did you want to come back? Was your hand still up?
No,
okay,
fine.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to our case officer now a comment on the presentation and summarise the issues. So, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. As you've seen from your papers, the site is allocated within the Mossley Hill Conservation Area, and the former building that existed on the site has since been demolished under the previous consent. As you've heard from the agent, planning permission was allowed on appeal for a building of a very similar scale and location following a refusal by the local planning authority. Whilst therefore similar objections have been raised by both the conservation officer and the design officer to those made in connection with the scheme that was previously refused, that appeal decision constitutes a very strong material consideration in the determination of this application. The scheme has been amended during the assessment of the application so that the siting of the building is now in a very similar location to that considered by the planning inspector and deemed to be acceptable. It is also of a similar scale and design to that considered by the inspector to be acceptable. There are other 4-storey developments along Carnatic Road, including a recent resolution to approve a 4-storey building 2 doors away at number 5 Carnatic Road. So given the previous appeal decision and the existence of other 4-storey buildings and extant consent for 4-storey buildings in the vicinity of the site, it's considered that any impacts on the wider conservation area and adjacent occupiers and the size and scale of the building is such so as to be considered to be acceptable. As you've heard from the agent, one of the key changes from the scheme that still raises concerns with the design specialist is the relocation of that main entrance to the side of the building. But as you've heard from the agent, the site is very much screened by a high boundary wall, and therefore from the wider public domain, the location of that door won't really be experienced. It will only be the upper floors that the public would experience from the public domain. And therefore, this in itself is not considered significant enough to warrant any refusal of the application. In terms of matters of highways, as you've heard again from the agent, there's a provision of 21 car parking spaces, which is 5 more than your policy would require. We're happy that this will ensure that any pressure on on-street parking in the area will be minimised. And the Head of Highways and Transportation is happy that any trip generation associated with the proposal would not have a detrimental impact on the operation of the wider network or highway safety. Tree loss at the site would be less than that was deemed to be acceptable by the planning inspectorate, which is welcomed. And the planting of 5 additional trees is considered to adequately compensate the loss of the 2 trees that would be lost to create the development. It's considered, therefore, that having due regard to and placing significant weight upon the previous appeal decision, the proposed development is acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval, Chair. So happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? I'm taking it, Malcolm, that you didn't lower your hand from before.
Don't appear to be any indications unless Malcolm can indicate otherwise. No, he's lowered his hand now, Chair.
So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Are there any further comments from members? No? In which case, Chair, your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat? Councillor Marrat, just...
Michael.
Thank you. That's better. Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
And lastly, Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. That concludes the voting on the application, and the application is therefore carried unanimously and approved on that basis, which will then take us to our final item of business on today's agenda, that relating to the former Childwall Valley Methodist Church on Score Lane in Childwall Ward. We do have a speaker for this item, Chair, as you'll be aware, if you care to introduce them, and I'll bring some relevant images on screen in the form of a presentation. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Richard Carmichael back with us, and the slides will be coming up on the screen as before. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Again, my name is Richard Carmichael. I'm here to speak in favour of the application for Childwall Valley Methodist Church. If we could pull up the next slide, please. This application is a replacement of an approval, is a replacement application for an approval that you kindly gave us last year. Existing in place is permission to erect a three-storey children's nursery and 6 apartments in 2 separate buildings on the site. You can see the site there is located on the corner of Childwall Valley Road and Score Lane. If we move through to the next slide, please. The proposal is to create 2 new buildings, one of 9 units and one of 6 units. The 9-unit building you can see at the north of the site is a direct replacement for the children's nursery that was proposed. The building sits predominantly within the footprint of the approved building and within the height. The building to the south is a 6 apartment building, and that is the same design as previously approved, but relocated by approximately 4.5 metres. If we move to the next slide, please. What we're seeing here, 2 key pieces of information. The elevation is that from Score Lane. You will notice the interface on the bottom slide to the left-hand side, just below where it says section CC, sorry, just above. That is the properties on Score Lane. So you will see the interface between the apartment buildings and the properties on Score Lane is no different than previously approved. Your officers are satisfied by interface distances and heights. What we have to the rear of that section is the interface to the properties on Barnside Court. The properties there, we have done some extensive consultation, which we'll run through in the next slide with your officers. We can pull the next slide up, please. So to just touch briefly on the interface arrangements, you will see there the orange line is the existing approval, is the existing building. The pink block is the existing approval, and the drawing that you can see beneath is the application for which we are seeking approval today. The interface to Barnside Court was carefully considered with your officers, and that has resulted in minimal windows to the upper floors. Where there are windows to the upper floors, they are all now frosted, so there is no direct overlooking. The roof structure has been amended with hipping to reduce scale and massing in appearance from Barnside Court. And we have the alignment of the properties are such that it's not directly overlooking in terms of mass. What you'll see is numbers 9 and 10 Barnside Court are pretty much a very similar arrangement to that which was previously approved. Number 8, the building has moved 4.5 metres south. That interface is now at 16.8 metres and is considered satisfactory by your case officers when reviewing the proposals that we have in place. To touch on other elements of the scheme, we have brought about 27 on-site parking spaces, which is 180% of requirement to ensure no on-site parking. They are all 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, large-scale units, lots of space available within the grounds, and also the adjacent parkland is available to us. All in all, following the extensive design development, the removal of the children's nursery and revisions to interfaces, it's been concluded with your officers that there is no impact on the adjacent properties, no unforeseen impact, and the application is overall, in our opinion, an improvement on the scheme that was previously put before you, and we would be happy to answer any queries that you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions? I think you'll agree with me, Michael. Nobody seems to be indicating.
That's
so
correct. I've just checked.
Hand over to our case officer now, who's going to summarise the issues and comment on the presentation. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Trish. Chair. This is right. This is as you've had a detailed presentation from the applicant, and you've got a detailed report in front of you. This is an application located in a primarily residential area, and as you've heard, separate consents were granted in March 2020 for a 98 childcare day nursery and 6 flats at the same site. This proposal is seeking a single consent, with the day nursery being replaced by the 3-storey apartment building of 9 units, and with the previously approved block of 6 flats being relocated some 4.5 metres to accommodate a central car park. The new block to replace the nursery is 3 storeys in height and is considered to be of an appropriate scale and design on this corner plot and in this residential area, so as not to be overbearing or over dominant, and is considered to be in keeping with the street scene. And you would have seen the sections that the applicant provided for you before. The scheme has been carefully considered and amended during the assessment to ensure that nearby properties are not unacceptably impacted through overlooking of habitable rooms. This has included, as you've heard from the applicant, the use of obscure glazing, the reconfiguration of rooms, and the removal of balconies to ensure that the amenity of nearby occupiers is protected. Any overlooking of gardens is also considered to be acceptable, with distances to party boundaries of being 10 metres, with any views into that being largely oblique in nature and not overly dissimilar to circumstances that you'd find elsewhere. There would be no tree loss across the site, with a net gain of some 27 trees. The application's been considered carefully by the Head of Highways and Transportation, who was happy that the trip generation associated with the proposed use from 15 units is going to be significantly less than what was previously approved by this committee last year for a 98-bed childcare day nursery. There's appropriate off-street parking provision in excess of what your standards require by approximately 180% parking provision. So therefore, we're happy that any pressure on on-street parking will be minimised. And therefore, Chair, we're happy to recommend the application for approval. I would just point out that Councillor Parsons requested that a site visit be undertaken, and clearly that's a decision for the committee to take. But happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions?
Don't appear to be any, Chair.
Michael, can you clarify as to whether Councillor Makinson was just coming along for Mapledale, or whether it was also for this one? I got a bit confused.
Correct, Chair, just for the Mapledale application,
Okay.
which is local ward councillor.
All right, thank you. So I don't see any other comments, so I'm going to move that the recommendation be approved.
Thank you, Chair. Any comments from members? No? In which case, Chair, your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson's left, as she indicated, at 11, so we'll
Yes,
move on
she
to
did
Councillor
say
Doyle.
11. Agreed, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat? Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Thank you. And lastly, Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. In terms of voting members, all members have voted in favour. The application is therefore approved on that basis, and that concludes our formal items of business today. Chair, if you'd like to conclude proceedings and comment accordingly.
Yes, it's gone very smoothly today, so thank you everybody, and excellent attendance as we've had ever since we went onto a virtual basis. But I wondered if you would just clarify for committee members rather than members of the public, Michael, about our unusual arrangement of having a planning meeting within a week and the agenda, and also about the site visit, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members and indeed members of the public who have been aware from media speculation and coverage in the local press yesterday and today, the City Council late last night published an agenda for next week's planning committee, which comprises 2 applications solely. One of it's related to the Bramley Moor Dock for a new football stadia for Everton Football Club. The second of which relates to the site of their current stadia, that of Goodison Park. Now, as members and indeed the public will be familiar, we're currently subject to some quite restrictions associated with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Typically, for applications of that scale, the committee would have undertaken a physical site visit and would have inspected the actual application site in person. Now, clearly that's not present in order to meet necessary social distancing requirements at this time. Therefore, committee members will be reviewing a video tour of the site later on this week, and they will be reviewing the application plans, and the same materials and the same information will be presented formally to planning committee next week on Tuesday, when the two applications are actually determined by committee. And as is the case with any formal site visit inspection anyway, no members of the public or applicants or agents would otherwise be able to comment during the site visit process. Therefore, that's entirely consistent with our previous process.
Michael makes it very clear, and members of the planning committee who have been with us for longer will recall that we did actually manage to have a site visit to Bramley Moor as part of our overall trip out to see the whole of the waterfront. So I still remember that quite vividly, and that's going to be helped with the virtual images that we're going to get. So thank you everybody for today, and I'll see you all next week, I hope.